The Galactic Council declared Earth weak, then humanity unleashed war. The chamber smelled like rain and burning wire, and I had stopped wondering which species was responsible for that particular combination. 641 delegates. 12 star systems. One item left on the agenda. Us. My chair was bolted 3 degrees off from the table edge. I had filed a formal complaint about this on day 1, in the Council's approved format, submitted through the correct channels, acknowledged with a response that translated to received with appreciation. The chair had not moved. I had adjusted my posture and told myself I would stop noticing. I was still noticing. My name is Claire Ward. 36 years old. Senior Liaison, Earth Xenodiplomatic Division, United Nations. For 11 months I had been the most senior human being on a station the size of a small moon, sitting in rooms that contained civilizations older than our written language, trying to represent a species that the Council had already decided, before any of us arrived, what it was going to do about. My colleague Nate Farrow had been stationed with me for the first 3 months before his rotation ended. On his last day he stood in the corridor outside our quarters and said, very quietly, "Claire, this is not going to go well." I told him I knew. He nodded and went home. That was 8 months ago. I had not spoken to anyone from Earth in 4 days. The session had been running for 6 hours. The classification of Earth was the last formal item. Everything before it had been procedural, interstellar in scope, and entirely unrelated to us, and I had sat through all of it because the rules of the chamber required full delegation attendance. I had taken notes on none of it. I had spent 6 hours looking at 641 beings and thinking about a paragraph I had not yet written. The chief assessor began reading. She was Keldarin. Ancient in a way that had moved past a number and become something more like a geological condition. Her body was crystalline, faceted, and when she moved, light refracted through her in thin blue lines that scattered across the chamber walls. She had served as chief assessor for 400 years. In that time she had processed the classification of 29 species. 2 of those species no longer existed. She gave no indication that she found one outcome more remarkable than the other. The AI translation came through my earpiece a half beat behind her actual communication, rendered in a voice designed to be calm regardless of content. Class 7. Passive biotic. Presystemic. No measurable threat projection. Candidate for protectorate status. I wrote it down. I had brought a physical notepad and a blue ballpoint pen from Geneva because no one had included in my mission briefing the fact that the chamber's ambient atmosphere destroyed electronic devices within 6 hours. My tablet had died on day 1. The pen, medium point, grabbed from my desk the morning I left without thinking, the same reflexive grab as coat and identification card, had not died. I had been writing by hand ever since, in every session that mattered, in every room where the outcome of something was being decided. Now I was using it to record the classification of 8 billion people. 1 tier above geological formations. I kept my expression still and my handwriting neat. The Shorvan delegation occupied a section of the far wall, and even across the chamber their presence had a particular quality. Their species looked, to human eyes, like what you might get if a storm system developed a deliberate agenda. Massive. Slow-moving. Taking up space in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. They had come to Earth 60 years ago without announcing themselves. They had placed instruments in ocean floors and secured sensors in Arctic ice and spent 18 months cataloging everything we were from a precise, professional distance. Then they had left without a word. We found their equipment 3 decades later. A deep ocean research team pulled up a monitoring device that was clearly not human-made, and for a while the world argued about what it meant and what the appropriate response was. Then we filed it and went back to other business. The Shorvan had authored the assessment report the Council was citing now. 83 pages. I had read it so many times I had stopped needing to look. Human lifespan, negligible on any galactic timescale. Interstellar capacity, early stage, almost entirely dependent on technology licensed through more developed systems. Internal political cohesion under prolonged stress, dangerously unstable. Military activity, localized, self-defeating, and tactically irrational. Every word of that was accurate. That was the thing I had not said to anyone. Not the Security Council. Not the Secretary General. Not the senior staff who had prepared me for this posting with 67 briefing documents and a dinner in New York that had felt, in hindsight, like something final. I had spent months sitting in meeting rooms watching people argue about procedural challenges and methodological bias and whether the council had proper standing, and I had not told a single one of them what I knew. The report was correct. They were not wrong about what we were. The vote moved around the chamber. Gas pressure beings. Crystalline beings. The flickering projection of a species that had not bothered to send a physical form, its vote registered as a sequence of light pulses decoded in my earpiece. Each delegation in their own way. 641 positions. Not one dissent. The chief assessor asked if Earth's delegation wished to formally acknowledge the classification. I stood. Earth acknowledges the classification, I said. She logged it. The chamber moved forward. Near the close of the session, the Shorvan delegate turned toward me. A considered movement. Deliberate. The kind that required some care given the distance and the size difference. When it spoke, the translation arrived in my ear as something smooth and unhurried, neither warm nor cold. Your species has a gift for surviving things that should have killed you, it said. We consider this a defect. I looked at it for a moment. Wrote it down. Did not answer. I had learned in 11 months that silence, placed correctly, carries more weight than most sentences. The Shorvan understood precision. I was being precise. The session ended. I walked back through the main corridor alone. It was wide enough for a freight convoy, built for beings of every conceivable scale, and I walked down the center of it in the low amber light with my footsteps too small for the space and the station's subsonic hum pressing steadily against my chest. Not unpleasant. Just a constant reminder that you were somewhere that was not built for you. I thought about what protectorate status actually meant, in practical terms. Not the diplomatic language. The practical terms. It meant Earth would be administered. It meant our resources would be catalogued and accessed under terms we did not write. It meant the species that had buried sensors in our ocean floor without asking 60 years ago now had formal authority to make decisions about our future using a process we had no meaningful vote in. It meant they had concluded we were too unstable to be trusted and too small to be feared. In the quarters, I opened the laptop. The formal report took 20 minutes. 3 paragraphs. Clean language. The kind of prose that reads clearly at 7 in the morning. Then I opened the appendix. Flagged it internal. Eyes only. Not for transmission off station by any channel. Typed 1 paragraph. The Shorvan assessment evaluated human military capacity using observable conflict data, casualty rates, and strategic coherence metrics. Their methodology was sound. Their data was accurate. Their conclusion was valid within those parameters. They assessed our wars. They did not assess what we do after we lose them. These are not the same dataset. They never have been. I read it back once. Closed the laptop. The pen was on the table beside it. Blue. Medium point. Still working. I set it down carefully, the way you set down something that has done its job well and deserves to rest. Then I went to sleep, because there was a 7:30 briefing and because the universe, as I had come to understand, does not hold itself for anyone. 18 months passed the way bad news travels, quietly at first, then everywhere at once. Protectorate status arrived in installments. No single announcement. No ceremony. Just terms, delivered piece by piece through official council channels, each one reasonable sounding in isolation, each one a door closing softly behind you. I was back in Geneva by then. New title, Earth Liaison to the Shorvan Administrative Liaison Body. My job, technically, was facilitation. Making sure communications between the Council's administrative arm and Earth's government bodies moved cleanly, that misunderstandings were resolved early, that the process ran without friction. I was good at it. I had learned, in 11 months on that station, how to make things run smoothly in rooms where the power balance was not in your favor. What I had not anticipated was how many doors there would be. The first term arrived 6 weeks after the vote. The Council had designated 3 of Jupiter's moons as viable resource extraction zones. The Shorvan had submitted the proposal. The language described the moons as uninhabited, which was technically accurate, and made no mention of the 11-year development plan Earth had been running for a permanent colony on Ganymede. I filed a formal objection through the correct channels. It was received with appreciation and set aside for future consideration. I filed that under their problem now because I had no better folder for it. The second term came 2 months later. The FTL licensing framework. Earth had been developing faster-than-light drive technology for 6 years, mostly in the dark, mostly in pieces, mostly not quite there yet. The new framework required that any FTL development be conducted under license from a Chauvin-approved intermediary body. The licensing fees were structured in a way that took me 3 days and 2 finance specialists to fully untangle. When we finished untangling them, one of the finance specialists looked up from his screen and said, "These are set high enough that we could never actually afford independent development." "That's the point," I said. He closed his laptop very carefully. The third term did not arrive in a formal channel. It arrived in a translated administrative document that should have been flagged for standard review but wasn't, and I found it because I had developed the habit, in Geneva, of reading the secondary attachment packets on every council communication that crossed my desk. The document was authored by the Calderon delegation. It was titled, in their administrative language, something that the translation matrix rendered as Population Balance Initiative. I read it 3 times in my office with the door closed. The practical content was this: the Council's long-range demographic modeling showed that Earth's population, if it continued its current growth trajectory, would cross the threshold for automatic Class 4 reassessment in approximately 90 years. Class 4 carried different rights and different obligations. The Calderon proposal outlined a set of administrative interventions, framed as public health initiatives, that would hold Earth's population below that threshold indefinitely. I had become, in 18 months of this work, very good at reading administrative language. I had become fluent in the particular dialect of careful, clean, bloodless words that institutions use when they want to do something they would prefer not to name directly. I knew what the proposal was. I called a closed session of the Security Council's Xenodiplomatic Committee. 14 people in a room in New York. I had the translated document on the screen behind me. I described the term, its structure, its intent, and its likely implementation pathway, the same way I had learned to describe everything in these rooms, cleanly, without unnecessary color, without making it easier or harder to hear than it was. The room was quiet for 9 seconds. I counted. Then General Leon Cole, British Army, 30 years of service, a man I had never once seen raise his voice in any briefing I had attended, said without any particular change in his tone, "When do they believe we will understand what this is?" "They do not believe we will," I said. He looked at the document on the screen for a moment. "Noted," he said. The committee chair called the session to its formal close. People filed out. I stayed to disconnect my equipment. Kate Ashby, my aide, was the last one out the door. She stopped in the doorway and looked back at me, and I noticed that she had been in this job for 2 years and had never once looked the way she looked right now. "Claire," she said. "I know," I said. She left. I went back to my apartment in Geneva that night. Made tea. Sat at my desk. The tea went cold while I was looking at the wall, and by the time I noticed it had gone cold I had already opened a new document on my laptop and had been typing for 40 minutes without stopping. The document was titled, formally, Contingency Architecture, Worst Case Modeling for Class 7 Escalation Scenarios. I typed through the night. I typed through the early hours of the morning when Geneva was quiet and the only sound was the rain on the windows and the soft mechanical percussion of keys. I typed everything I had been thinking for 18 months, everything I had been filing and adjusting my posture around and setting down carefully so I could sleep. I typed what the terms meant individually and what they meant together. I typed what protectorate status would look like in 40 years and what it would look like in 90. I typed what the Chauvin had concluded about us and what they had not thought to ask. At 4 in the morning I stopped typing and read what I had written. Then I encrypted it and sent it to 15 people. Not diplomats. Not committee members. Not anyone with a title that included the words liaison or facilitation. 37 signatures came back within 48 hours. I looked at the list of names for a long time. Then I called Kate and told her to clear my schedule for the rest of the week. "All of it?" she asked. "All of it," I said. "The council liaison meeting on Thursday." All of it, Kate. A pause. Understood, she said. I looked at the tea, still on my desk from the night before, still cold, having done nothing to earn the disappointment I felt looking at it. I made a new cup and started the second document. I was recalled from my posting on a Tuesday. Not by the UN. Not by the Xenodiplomatic Division. By a name I did not recognize on a letterhead I did not recognize, attached to a clearance level I had not known I had. The car came at 6 in the morning. I brought a bag because the letter said 3 days, and I brought the notepad and the pen because I brought them everywhere now, the same way you carry something that has never let you down. The driver did not speak for the first hour, which I respected. Then he said, "There's a briefing packet in the door pocket, Commander." I had not been called Commander in a professional context before. I opened the pocket and took out the packet. Read it in the remaining 40 minutes of the drive. By the time we arrived I had read it twice. My new title was Special Director, Human Continuity Initiative. The packet described the role in 4 sentences that told me almost nothing. It also included a 6-page non-disclosure framework and a single paragraph near the back that contained the phrase, "You are being shown these facilities because it has been determined that your specific understanding of the Council's assessment of Earth is necessary context for operational decisions going forward." A woman was waiting at the entrance of a facility that, from the outside, appeared to be an unremarkable research administration building on the edge of nowhere. She was in her 60s, gray-haired, in a uniform that had no decorative elements at all. She extended her hand. "Admiral Owen Drake," she said. "Welcome. We have 3 stops today." She did not offer further context. She turned and walked inside and I followed. The first facility was not in that building. We took a transport, classified, deep range, the kind that does not appear on any civilian or commercial tracking system, to the lunar dark side. The journey was not long. The facility we entered was. I do not have a word for what I saw when the bay doors opened. I have several words, and none of them are adequate, and I have spent considerable time since then understanding that the inadequacy is the point, that the thing itself was built to exceed the vocabulary available to describe it. It was a shipyard. Not a prototype lab. Not a research facility. A production-scale shipyard, in full operation, staffed, lit, active, with vessels at various stages of completion in a line that extended further than I could see from where I stood. The ships were not small. The ships were the kind of thing you look at and then look away from because your brain needs a moment to accept the scale. "You built these without reporting them to the Council," I said. "The Council asked us to report any developments in interstellar travel capacity," Drake said. "These are not interstellar travel vessels." I looked at the ships. "What are they?" "Something else," she said, and walked on. The second facility was on Mars. Subsurface, Acidalia planitia, below a geological feature that appears on no public survey. We arrived at a complex that had been in continuous operation for 22 years. The research running inside it covered materials I recognized from Council intelligence briefings as specifically restricted under the FTL licensing framework, technology that Earth was, formally, not developing independently. "How?" I said. It was not a full question. Drake understood it anyway. "The same way your species has always developed things it was told it could not have," she said. "We wanted it badly enough. We had enough people who were good enough. And we were working while they were writing frameworks." I looked at the wall of an active research lab containing 22 years of work that, on paper, did not exist. "How many people know about this?" I asked. "Enough," she said. The third stop was not a facility I had a reference for. The display she showed me, in a clean briefing room, contained coordinates in the Oort cloud and a series of numbers I read and reread for 15 minutes. I read them the way you read something in a language you almost speak, where you understand the grammar and most of the words but the meaning keeps arriving slightly delayed. I looked up at Drake. "This has been operational how long?" I asked. "Long enough," she said. There was one more thing. After the 3 facilities, after the transport back, in a plain room with no windows, Drake introduced me to the head of a division that did not appear in any organizational chart I had ever seen. Her name was Diana Marsh. She looked like she had been working without sufficient sleep for several years and had made her peace with that. "We have been studying the Council species," Diana said. All of them. For 30 years. We have built psychological profiles based on captured communications, behavioral data from council sessions, stress response modeling across multiple encounter scenarios. She paused. We know what frightens them. I sat with that for a moment. Do they have fears? I asked. Everything with a functional nervous system has fears, she said. We found theirs. Drake set a thin folder on the table in front of me. Inside it was one page with two things on it. A date. And a designation. The date was 6 weeks from the day I was sitting in that room. The designation was a single word, threshold. What happens at threshold? I asked. Drake looked at me with the expression of someone who has been carrying something heavy for long enough that they have reorganized their entire posture around it. The culling proposal goes to final vote, she said. Based on current delegate positions, it passes. Implementation begins 90 days after the vote. I looked at the folder. And if we respond before implementation, then it is a war. And if we do not respond? Drake did not answer. She did not have to. The facilities I had seen that day were not built by people who intended not to respond. The 30 years of psychological profiling, the shipyard on the lunar dark side, the 2-decade research program in Martian rock, none of that was the work of a species that had decided not to answer. It was the work of a species that had been waiting for the right question. I sat in that room for a while after Drake left. The folder was on the table. The pen was in my pocket. I took it out and held it and did not write anything. Then I asked for a secure line to the Security Council. Leon Cole answered on the third ring, which meant he had been expecting the call. Begin the inventory, I said. A pause. Understood, he said. He did not ask what I meant. He already knew. The war did not begin with a declaration. No announcement. No ultimatum. No press release. On a morning that looked like any other morning on the Council's administrative calendar, 16 Shorvan deep space monitoring stations reported normal status. Then they stopped reporting. Not destroyed. The Shorvan sent assessment teams to the coordinates and found empty space. No debris. No energy signature. No evidence of an event. The stations were simply absent, the way a word is absent when you reach for it and it is not there. This was deliberate. We had not wanted them to know what hit them. We had wanted them to not know whether something had hit them at all. The Shorvan dispatched an enforcement fleet. Standard response. Overwhelming by any Class 7 metric, by any metric Earth's military had ever been evaluated against. The fleet was large enough that the Council's own observers flagged the mobilization as disproportionate, which told you something about how seriously the Shorvan took the situation. The fleet arrived at the last registered coordinates of 3 of the missing stations. Empty space. No human fleet. No engagement. No contact. Nothing that matched any tactical model the Shorvan command structure had prepared for, because our fleet was not where it was supposed to be, was not operating on the patterns their projections had mapped, and was not doing the things that a Class 7 species was expected to do when confronted with an enforcement fleet of that scale. I was in a secure operations room in Geneva when the first readouts came back. 6 screens. Live feeds from assets I will not describe in further detail. Leon Cole was 2 seats to my left. Kate Ashby was managing communications at the far end of the room. There were 12 other people I will not name. Cole read the Shorvan response report. They are looking for the strategy, he said. There is not one, I said. Not the way they mean. He glanced at me. Humans do not fight by finding the optimal path, I said. We fight by breaking things until something starts working. We fail and we learn and we come back before the other side has finished analyzing the first contact. Cole looked back at the screens. The Shorvan have never encountered a military doctrine based on deliberate iteration, I said. Their models assume that tactics are planned in advance and executed. Ours are discovered in real time. He was quiet for a moment. How long before they adjust, he asked. That, I said, is what Diana's team spent 30 years preparing for. The Shorvan dispatched a second fleet. Larger than the first. This one carried council authorization and the full weight of Shorvan military infrastructure behind it. It also disappeared. This took longer. The gravity net in the Oort cloud was not instantaneous, and this fleet had come in with countermeasures active. The engagement, if you could call it that, lasted 11 hours. At the end of it, the Shorvan command received no signal from the fleet. No final communication. No distress call. Nothing. The council convened an emergency session. The Keldaran delegation called it an anomaly. The oldest word diplomats reach for when the situation has outpaced their frameworks. Diana's team activated on day 9. I watched it happen through feeds I do not fully understand even now. The psychological operations the team had built were not traditional in any way I had a prior reference for. They had spent 30 years studying the Shorvan sensory architecture, their neural response patterns, the specific frequencies and signal types that their nervous systems processed involuntarily. What the team broadcast on day 9 was received by every Shorvan nervous system in the operational theater simultaneously. It was not a weapon in the way that word is typically used. It was more like a mirror. Every fear the Shorvan had, mapped and synthesized over 30 years of careful study, reflected back at them in their own internal language, on a frequency their own biology could not filter. It lasted 47 seconds. The Shorvan forward command went silent for 6 hours after that. By day 14, the Keldaran delegation had submitted a formal cease contact request. Not a ceasefire. A cease contact. They did not want to exchange any further communications with the human military until they had reassessed the situation. An 18,000-year-old civilization, one of the oldest active members of the council, requested a pause because they needed to think. The Verith Barometric Communication Network, which had been broadcasting council operational coordination since the beginning of the response, went silent on day 16. My translation team spent 3 hours analyzing the silence. The closest interpretation was, "We are reconsidering our position." On day 22, the remaining Shorvan command structure masked what they had. Everything. Their full available fleet, their primary command vessels, their reserve assets that had not been committed to any previous engagement. They massed it at the edge of the Sol system, holding position, a declaration of capacity that said, "This is everything we have, and now you know it." I looked at the readout for a long time. It was enormous. I will not pretend otherwise. It was a force that, 18 months ago, would have ended the conversation immediately and permanently. I authorized the response. What came out of the Oort cloud is not something I have ever tried to describe in full. I have the Shorvan sensor logs from the engagement, captured and translated by Diana's team in the aftermath, and I have read them more than once. Their instruments recorded something for which their classification system had no existing category. The translation matrix, working from their own language, produced the closest approximation their conceptual vocabulary allowed. The wound that moved. 29 minutes. Then silence in every direction. On day 29, a communication arrived from the Shorvan High Command. A ceasefire request. The first ceasefire request in Shorvan military history. Their records went back 4,000 years. In 4,000 years they had never sent one. I read it twice. Then I looked at my calendar. A notification had been sitting on my screen since the start of the engagement, automated, forgotten, from before everything, a dental appointment in Geneva, 1400 hours, 2 weeks overdue. I stared at it for a moment. Noted, I said, to no one in particular. Cole looked over. The ceasefire request, I clarified. Understood, he said. I accepted the request on behalf of Earth. Then I closed the calendar notification and began the next document. The chamber smelled different the second time. Not rain and burning wire. Something else. Something with less certainty in it. 641 delegates. 12 star systems. One item on the agenda. The same item as before, technically. But the weight of it had redistributed. My chair was at the same wrong angle. I had not filed a complaint this time. I sat at the same angle I had always sat at, and I noticed that it no longer bothered me, and I spent a moment thinking about what that said about the relationship between discomfort and familiarity. General Cole was in the gallery, non-voting, observer status. He had insisted on attending. Kate Ashby was at the communications station behind me. Diana Marsh had remained in Geneva, where she had too much work to attend a ceremony, which was how she described this session in the message she sent me that morning. I looked at the Shorven delegation across the chamber. They were smaller, somehow. Not physically. The same physical presence, the same storm system quality. But something about the space they took up had changed. I noticed this and did not spend time trying to name it precisely. The Keldaran chief assessor opened the session. Same crystalline body. Same blue lines scattered across the walls. Her formal address ran 40 minutes and covered the Council's position on the recent events in what she called an extraordinary deviation from established interspecies relations protocols. 40 minutes of language that had been assembled very carefully by beings who had been building this kind of language for thousands of years. The subtext, which I had spent a career learning to read, was one sentence. We did not know. I waited until it was Earth's turn to speak. I stood. We understand, I said. That was the point. The chamber was quiet for a moment. Then the negotiations began. They took 4 hours. 4 hours of careful language from every direction, diplomatic frameworks proposed and adjusted and reworded, translation matrices running in 6 different simultaneous directions. Cole told me afterward it was the most concentrated 4 hours of human diplomatic history. I told him I had been too busy inside it to experience it that way. The core question was what to do with Earth's classification. Class 7 passive biotic was clearly no longer applicable. The Council did not debate this. What they debated was what came next, and the debate was complicated by the fact that their classification index had been built over 4,000 years to categorize species they understood, and they did not understand us. Not in the way they needed to. They tried Class 4 first. Class 4 carried teeth, legally speaking, rights of territorial sovereignty, resource independence, mandatory consultation on any administrative decisions affecting the classified species. The Shorven delegation pushed back on Class 4. The Keldaran elder noted that Class 4 assumed predictable threat modeling, and that Earth's behavior in the recent conflict had not conformed to any predictive model the Council possessed. They tried Class 3. Class 3 came with mutual defense obligations that 3 other Council members immediately said they were not comfortable with, given the circumstances. They went through 5 classifications in 2 hours. I sat quietly through all of it and took notes and did not offer suggestions. Then the Keldaran elder, for the first time in the session, addressed me directly. Commander Ward, she said, through the translation. You have been present in this chamber before under different circumstances. You have studied us as we have studied you. In your assessment, what classification does your species merit? The room was very still. I thought about the facilities on the lunar dark side. The 22 years of research under Martian rock. The 30 years of psychological profiling. The gravity net. The dental appointment notification that had kept my hands from trembling during the authorization. I thought about the pen. One that you have not invented yet, I said. Because you built your index around species you understood. You have not encountered us before. The elder was silent for a moment. Then we will build it now, she said. It took another 2 hours. The final designation was Class Unranked, Variable Threat Ceiling. It was not elegant, as classifications go. It did not fit neatly beside the other entries in their 4,000-year index. The variable threat ceiling element was new language, created in this session, meaning, the upper limit of this species' capacity cannot be determined with current available data. Meaning, we do not know how far this goes. Meaning, we have decided we would rather not find out. The culling proposal was formally withdrawn. Every signatory to the original document submitted a formal retraction. The Keldaran elder read each retraction into the record herself, one by one, which took 40 minutes and which I believe she did deliberately and at full length, though I cannot prove that. The resource extraction terms for Jupiter's moons were reversed. The FTL licensing framework was dissolved. The Ganymede colony development plan was reinstated, with a formal council acknowledgement of its prior existence, which was the closest the council's language could get to an apology. I accepted each term as it was offered. I did not celebrate any of them. Cole found me in the corridor after the session closed. He fell into step beside me and we walked for a while without talking, the way people walk when they have been through the same thing together and have not yet figured out what language it requires. That went well, he said finally. Yes, I said. The variable threat ceiling designation. He considered it. They will spend the next 200 years arguing about what to put in that blank. Good, I said. He glanced at me. Are you all right? I thought about it. The question deserved more than a reflexive answer. I will be, I said. He nodded, once, in the way that people nod when they understand exactly what those 3 words are carrying. He went one direction at the next junction. I went the other. In my quarters I sat at the desk for a while without doing anything. The station's subsonic hum was the same as it had always been. The amber light in the corridor was the same. Outside the small viewport the stars were the same configuration they had been the last time I sat here, 11 months ago, which was not how time felt from the inside, but was what the universe maintained regardless. I opened my laptop. Found the original report. The one from the first session, the night after the classification vote. Read the formal summary, which I had written in clean measured paragraphs for a security council that needed briefing at 7 in the morning. Then I opened the appendix. Flagged internal. Eyes only. Still there. Never transmitted. I read the paragraph I had written that night. The Shorven assessment evaluated human military capacity using observable conflict data, casualty rates, and strategic coherence metrics. Their methodology was sound. Their data was accurate. Their conclusion was valid within those parameters. They assessed our wars. They did not assess what we do after we lose them. These are not the same dataset. They never have been. I sat with that for a while. Then I opened a new document. The title field stayed empty for a long time. I had not decided what to call it yet. I had not decided exactly what it was yet, except that it was the thing that came after everything, and that it was mine in a way the formal reports were not. I typed the title. Post-conflict assessment, humanity. Then I sat back and looked at it. Then I typed the first line. The species most capable of ending us is ourselves. This has not changed. Everything else has. I looked at the pen. It was on the table beside the laptop, where I always put it. Blue. Medium point.